Okay, so the next thing that we have is we're talking about the demand curves. So amazingly important to understand the demand curves, get well versed with them. So let's get on with it, shall we? The demand curve is more or less always a downward sloping curve. It is a downward sloping curve, and you'll just know why it is a downward sloping curve in a few minutes. So what is happening in this demand curve is that at given price P1, the quantity demanded for a product is Q1. But if you decrease the price from P1 to P2, the quantity demanded for that product increases. So the quantity demanded increases with the price decrease. So hence it is seen that price falls from P1 to P2, quantity demanded increases from Q1 to Q2. So this is basically a very normal demand curve of yours. We will get into shifts and movements along the curve as well. Now here are the determinants of the demand curve. What are the determinants of the demand curve? I'll make a graph over here as well so we'll know. So what are the determinants of the demand curve? The determinants of the demand curve are fashion, taste. So because of fashion and taste, so first we'll get into the demand curve. So for example, this is your very normal downward sloping curve, right? The demand curve can shift here and here. So for example, this is D0, this is D1, and this is D2. This is QTY. This is price. Always remember y-axis will be either price, either income, any measure from money and money-wise, so that is basically your y-axis. Unit-wise, your measure will always be your x-axis in economics. So the demand from D0 to D1, the demand curve has shifted towards the right. And the shift from D0 to D2, the demand curve has shifted towards the left. What is happening over here? I'll tell you in just a moment. So all of these determinants that you see, fashions and taste. So if fashion and taste changes, let's say we remember some years ago there was a fashion for fidget spinners. Remember, I also got a fidget spinner actually. For myself, it was said to be a stress reliever. So apparently, what happened was that the demand for those fidget spinners, they increased drastically around the world, right? When that happened, your demand curve went from D0 to D1, shifted towards the right. So if that happens, it's going to shift. If the fashion or taste for something goes down and it goes obsolete now, then what will happen? Your demand curve will shift from D0 to D2, and the demand curve will go towards the left. If the income changes, this will happen. If somebody's income has increased, demand curve will shift towards the right. If substitutes and complements are there, so for example, if there are a lot of substitutes for your product, your demand curve will go towards the left. If there are substitutes and a lot of substitutes for your product, your demand curve will go towards the left. If the complements for your product has increased, your demand curve will go towards the right, because now there are a lot of complements for your product will be in more demand now, right? So for example, I'll give you an example for a complement. A complement is, let's say, petrol in car. If the car prices, if a petrol run car price has decreased, the demand for petrol will increase. The demand for those cars will also increase. Do you understand? If the petrol run car prices have increased, the demand for your substitute product will also increase. You understand? So for substitutes and complements, quantity demanded for substitutes will increase if price of your product increases, right? So this is how it goes for substitutes and complements. Then the next thing that we have is advertising. If you have a very big advertising budget, a very big marketing budget. If you advertise your product to the masses, then your demand curve will go towards the right, or D1. If you do not market your product, on the other hand, if you do not have any advertising budget, your demand curve will go towards the left, because now your product is not going to the masses, it's not going to the public, because of which the demand curve will shift. Second last that you have is government policy. So if there is a new government policy which says that leather is no more allowed, let's say, for example, or there was a policy that imported goods have very heavy duty on them, or very heavy taxes. So if that happens, what will happen is, if your product has taxes, the demand for your product will go down as prices increases. Remember, we read in the law of demand. And if the taxes are implemented on a substitute product of yours, then the demand for your product will automatically increase. As their price has increased now, so everyone will switch to your product. So that's what happens in government. There are other government policies as well. We'll come into government policies in the later courses, in the later lectures. Then finally you have economy. So if the economy is doing good, you get a new natural resource. So for example, you get a natural resource. My house, my place over here, we discover oil from here. What will happen is, automatically the price or the demand for my house or my apartment will increase automatically. Exactly the same way we had a few months back, there was a speculation that oil is being found in Pakistan, in the ports of Karachi and everywhere. So when that happened, automatically a lot of people were looking towards Pakistan as an investment hub. If we should invest over here, now they have oil and all of that. But then when there were only rumors or nothing substantial happened, then everyone obviously calmed themselves down. So this is how the economy works as well. If the economy is doing good, your demand will go towards D1, towards the right. If your economy is not doing very well, it's facing inflation, it's facing unemployment, then your demand will always go towards the left, towards D2. Right? Everyone thinks that if price changes, the demand curve will also change. So if price of a product increases or decreases, what will happen? Will there be a shift in the demand curve? No, there will not be a shift in the demand curve. If the price changes from P1 to P2, the quantity demanded will change from Q1 to Q2. Right? So basically what I'm trying to say is, if the price changes from P0 to P2, then there will be a movement along the curve. If there is a price change from P0 to P1, there will be a movement along the curve, not a shift. Always remember, when there is a price change, there will never be a shift in the demand curve. Rather, there will be a movement along the demand curve. There will not be a shift in the demand curve. The shift in the demand curve will only and only be caused by the determinants that we discussed earlier: taste, fashion, economy, population. All of these reasons are the reasons because of which there will be a shift in the demand curve.